Staying in South Africa, a court battle is underway in the country about human rights abuses across the border. Rights activists want to compel South Africa to investigate and prosecute Zimbabweans suspected of crimes against humanity. eNews Africa reporter Beauregard Trump has more.
Rights groups, lawyers and the opposition have complained for years about human rights abuses in Zimbabwe. Morgan Tsvangirai was famously the victim of one beating by police. Some activists say South Africa must meet its obligation under international law and arrest and prosecute suspects.
It can act as a warning to those who are committing violations of human rights on the ground in Zimbabwe, that they will not have, the world is shrinking, they will not have a safe haven anywhere.
So far, South African prosecutors have refused. It's emerged in court that the official in charge of such cases recommended authorities investigate. But the official, Anton Ackerman, says he was ignored and misled by state prosecutors.
Ackerman, in fact, was manipulated, lied to, prevented from putting his views before the court.
Officials from the South African Prosecuting Authority were unavailable for comment. The case could complicate South Africa's attempts to mediate reform in Zimbabwe. Robert Mugabe is already critical of those efforts and says the allegations of human rights abuses are part of a Western plot to oust him. Beauregard Trump, eNews.
All right, for more on that, we are now joined in studio by Executive Director of the Southern African Litigation Centre, Nicole Fritz. Nicole, a very good evening to you and thanks very much for joining us here on eNews Africa. Would you say the South African government is trying to run away from its international obligations?
Well, the purpose of the case is, in fact, us saying that South Africa does have these obligations under the International Criminal Court. It's a member thereof, that it has its own International Criminal Court Act, that it is obliged to investigate and prosecute. We've had an affidavit put up in the court today by a senior decision maker who says that the dossier that we submitted in 2008 was sufficiently serious to warrant the initiation of an investigation. To the extent that that has not happened, and that we believe considerations that were not appropriate were taken into account, and that sufficient consideration to relevant considerations were not given import by South Africa's investigating and prosecuting authorities, yes, I mean, essentially we are saying that they have run away thus far from their obligations under international law.
Now, if your case is successful, can we expect to see members of the Zimbabwean government prosecuted or tried in South Africa?
It's difficult to anticipate what the outcome of the case will be. If we're successful, we're asking that an investigation be initiated. We believe that there is sufficiently serious evidence to warrant an investigation. Prosecution would depend on those individuals coming into South Africa. It would only be if they travelled into South Africa that South Africa could then exercise jurisdiction in respect of these individuals. But certainly there is the prospect, if this case is successful, that individuals who are responsible for violations in Zimbabwe, but elsewhere in the world, if they amount to crimes against humanity and genocide, could be prosecuted before South Africa's courts. And that was the purpose of the Act.
Now, is there not a fear or have you considered how this might impact the already fragile relations between South Africa and Zimbabwe moving ahead with the case?
Well, the fact is, we haven't had any control as to when this case comes to court. But what is interesting is it comes to court at, as you say, an increasingly fragile time in the Zimbabwean crisis. We're seeing increasing statements to the effect that there will be elections this year, that the global political agreement will not be respected. But to some extent that is because there is no rule of law within Zimbabwe. There is a culture of impunity that prevails, that there is no justice system that can bring people to account, and that we believe that to some extent, by insisting on adherence to the rule of law and to justice, that this case and efforts like it can in fact have a propitious effect rather than a negative effect.
All right, Nicole, we're out of time. That's where we'll have to leave it. Thanks very much for joining us. That was Nicole Fritz, the Executive Director of the Southern African Litigation Centre, talking to us in our Johannesburg studios.